And thank you everybody for joining. For those who don't know what Redis is, just a quick overview. If it happens in real time, it's probably Redis. It's the in-RAM in-memory database, and we'll go from there. So there's definitely a big difference between Redis open source, the open source software, and enterprise version. And of course, there's enterprise versions all over, no matter what ISP you're looking at. But something I talk about a lot broadly on LinkedIn and everywhere else is kind of the differences between building Redis open source from the ground up or using an enterprise version. And usually it's significant, right? The difference in work and money and maintenance is significant. Today, I'm going to be focusing on Redis Enterprise, which is our enterprise offering. And so let's get into it. So a little bit about me really quick. Like Ron said, I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. I am on the slopes 3 to 4 times a week. I'm very lucky to be super, super close to one of the best ski resorts in North America. This image here on the right is Mineral Basin at Snowbird, one of my favorite places on earth. And then the picture on the bottom is me and my wife. And then maybe a little bit of background work history. So I'm not really a market, even though I'm in marketing now, in product marketing at Redis, I'm not a marketing person. I'm definitely a technical person. I have a technical background, and Redis brought me over to speak about, technical aspects for marketing. So I started off while I was in school at Oracle as a systems engineer. I got to work on Oracle database before Oracle Cloud was a thing. And then I was actually at Oracle when Oracle Cloud started to take off. So that was really cool to see. I also worked at a cryptocurrency firm back in the day when crypto was still very new. And then I went to Domo, which I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with Domo. It's a business intelligence platform. I was a data scientist, not an actual data scientist, but a data scientist consultant, building out different models to predict like turnover and everything else to help companies save money and so forth. So Domo was an awesome experience. And then I came over to Redis, and you might see my background. I got a bunch of video equipment. I make a ton of video for Redis. That's kind of my main focus. So yeah, let's get into it. Also in this presentation, I'm not going to be using a typical slide deck where there's, a bunch of writing and images. I'm actually using GIFs. And so hopefully that's more visually pleasing and easier to maintain that information. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy. I'd love to hear your feedback at the end, whether or not the GIFs was either a good thing or a bad thing. If it's a bad thing, I'll scrap it. So the agenda today, let's get into the basics of the topic. So as businesses work to modernize their legacy systems, one of the first steps is to start moving workloads off of on-prem databases to the cloud. Naturally, a hybrid cloud architecture is created to facilitate this modernization, but it isn't just a temporary solution. It is one of the most popular architectures out there because of its many benefits. In my presentation today, we'll cover the hybrid cloud architecture from a high-level view. What is it? Why is it popular? When does this architecture make sense for businesses? And are there any challenges that go along with it? So a hybrid cloud, just to get us on the same page, is when we have an application, product, or service running in a combination of different infrastructures. The most common hybrid cloud example is combining public and private cloud environments, like an on-premises data center and a public cloud computing environment. It is very popular because almost no one can rely entirely on a single infrastructure. Historically, businesses started on-premises data centers to support their product or service. This means millions of dollars were invested in infrastructure and expertise, let's call it billions, over the last couple of decades. Companies won't just abandon this investment, even if they wanted to move most of their workloads onto the public cloud. Plus, there are actually quite a few industries out there where it's simply not feasible for them to leave their private data centers. For example, businesses with regulatory compliance mandates like HIPAA, PCI, and many more, and businesses that have either a limited budget or small footprint. Kenneth, I'm not sure if you could go on mute for us. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Or if Ron, maybe you could help us. Well, I'll keep going. Oh, thank you, Kenneth. So
what was that, Talon? What's
Oh,
that?
no, all good. We just had some background noise. We're good now. Sorry.
Okay.
Um, we'll start with saying a hybrid approach allows you to decide whether to run your workloads, on-prem or off cloud, or in the cloud or off-prem. Um, Essentially being able to choose the governance of where sensitive data that needs to be kept in private data centers. Performance wise, pinning a product or service against an on-prem data center provides only good latency for those who are in proximity of that data center. Um, while distributing the product or service across remote locations in the cloud will provide much better response times across many regions. In regards to cost, typically using public cloud is better for cost for those more dynamic workloads where it is hard to predict throughput. Plus, services usually exist to help you scale up and scale down the resources you need when you need them, instead of just sinking cost into permanent on-prem infrastructure, not to mention the acquisition time of new hardware. And that's just the start of many benefits of hybrid cloud deployment. But before we move on to other great reasons why it makes sense, maybe let's cover some challenges. First off, compatibility between legacy applications and public cloud services will prevent companies from getting started. This is the number one reason why either smaller companies, newer companies who started on a local server, or even legacy companies that have a ton of infrastructure, the number one reason why they won't buy some cloud or hybrid cloud product is because of simply, compatibility between systems. From a complexity standpoint, security and access control gets super complicated because we simply have more doors and windows to lock, more security maintenance and patching, additionally getting control on observability after distributing data across multiple environments. Another important one to mention is data consistency across environments. It's very common for businesses to underestimate the complexity of getting data to be consistently accurate and persistent across multiple environments and regions. And that's where Redis Enterprise comes into the picture as a simplified approach to getting that hybrid cloud architecture with best-in-class speed, data consistency, and high availability in a real-time data solution. Scale your data layer consistently across clouds, on-prem, hybrid, or anywhere in the globe. There are quite a few considerations about keeping data consistent in your application architecture. First is improved data quality. And this one's pretty obvious. When data is consistent across multiple data centers, you're gonna have improved data quality. But let's talk about it for a second. So by keeping data consistent across the data layer, it helps to ensure that data is accurate and up to date. This ensures that the data is reliable and can be used for analysis and decision making. The second reason is reduced data duplication. By keeping data organized and consistent across the data layer, duplicate data can be avoided, helping reduce data storage costs, as well as save time and effort when retrieving data. And third, improve performance. I think this is not talked about enough in the data space. We don't consider, or we don't relate consistency very often with performance, but it's super, super relevant. Consistent data across the data layer can help optimize query performance and reduce data retrieval time, thus improving system performance and user experience. Finally, improve security. Keeping data consistent across the data layer can ensure that only authorized users have access to sensitive data, preventing data breaches and other security issues. Redis Enterprise also helps with throughput requirements with automated elastic scaling, which is pretty unique for an enterprise version of Redis. Many other offerings of Redis out there usually don't offer elastic automatic scaling, which allows you to use it when you need it. With the seasonal demand changing throughput needs dramatically, you need a flexible and scalable solution, which makes Redis Enterprise a great fit for any size of workload, product, customer, or service, large or small. Redis Enterprise provides flexibility while deploying across multiple environments, providing quick ways to get started at any of the preferred cloud vendors. Setting up active in Redis Enterprise, and for those who don't know what active is, it's essentially setting up clusters in multiple regions so that data is replicated across those regions, essentially giving sub-millisecond response times to no matter where the customer is. And
Hey,
setting that
Alan,
up. Yeah, go ahead.
Alan. All right. So our first gift card winners, Larry. He was asking a question about, with all this complexity of a hybrid cloud architecture versus a more traditional on-prem solution only, does it make DR more complicated? Are there multiple points of failure that may reduce performance? Maybe could you comment on that?
Sure
and
thing.
I'm also going to ask Carlos from Haiku to remember this, because when you're talking about DR, how do you go about having a very effective DR strategy when you've got data that resides in so many different places? But maybe you could address it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it actually goes really along well, Larry, with what I was talking about with active-active. When you have an active-active deployment, when you have multiple clusters in multiple regions, you might think, oh my gosh, like that's so many different points of failure. What's the disaster plan look like for that? What actually happens is that the more active-active you have up, the more clusters you have distributed, the higher amount of availability you have. So if you have an active-active setup with Redis Enterprise, you get 5 nines of availability, which is best in class, high availability for any Redis Enterprise offering out there, which I think equates less than 30 seconds of downtime per month, which is insane. And the reason why that is because if a certain cluster or even a certain, let's say we'll start from the bottom. So if a node goes down, the other nodes can compensate for that node and load that node back up when it comes back online. And then if a whole cluster goes down, other clusters can also do the same thing for that. So usually there's no data loss when you have an active setup. There's usually no data loss because of the measures that we have set up to help not only recover that cluster or that database, but catch that database back up with consistency. So that's kind of one of the main benefits why people actually move to an active setup. So hopefully that helps. I actually have quite a few, I call them tech talks, technical webinars on active and high availability and so forth. So love to connect with you after this perhaps and send you a couple links to that. Go more into depth on the technicalities of how that's possible. But yeah, hopefully that helps, Larry. So I was talking about how you can essentially deploy Redis Enterprise on any of your preferred cloud vendors and set up active. So by doing that, we're also adding that high availability and durability that I was talking about earlier, but also mainly the main purpose why people do this is to reduce the latency for users in those regions. And like I mentioned, it's 5 nines of availability, and most of our competitors are 3 nines or 4 nines, which is a pretty big difference when it comes to time per month and over a whole year. It kind of adds up. All right, let's move on. So this is kind of a complicated animation here, and I kind of wanted to go into some of the technicalities, and this might go a little bit deeper into what I was talking about earlier too, Larry. So security-wise, Redis Enterprise Software, which is our on-prem software version, not the cloud version, is the customizable Redis for your on-prem needs to really hone in on the security, access control, and regulatory compliance requirements. So as I was talking about before, there's lots of businesses who simply just won't want to have certain workloads in the cloud because of security reasons. This is basically our software on-prem solution for those types of customers. We know that data security and governance are really important. Redis Enterprise Software enables real-time use cases, even for those who have regulatory compliance mandates. You can get sub-millisecond response times on your on-prem private data centers for your more sensitive data, seamlessly connected to your public cloud or dynamic workloads. And in regards to like customers and current, let's call them deals we're working with customers and our solution architects, this is actually pretty common. I think nowadays, a lot of customers or a lot of businesses out there already have their more dynamic workloads on the cloud. But right now, what I'm seeing in the last couple of years is finally customers are trying to optimize their on-prem data that needs to stay on-prem. I think it's no longer acceptable for these customers to have their on-prem data just performing at a very much slower rate compared to their cloud. So that's what we're seeing a lot. We're seeing a lot of deals with on-prem Redis Enterprise Software, kind of adding that sub-millisecond speed to on-prem. Redis Enterprise Software supports inter-node encryption, which is what we're looking at here. which encrypts internal communication between nodes, improving the security of data as it travels within a cluster, enabled for the control plane, which manages the cluster and its databases. Let's move on. And then also the issue of observability, as I think a lot of you know on the call, as you continue to expand out your data layer and expand out in your architecture, observability becomes even harder and harder. Trying to nail down and get a consistent view across many databases or clusters, and those services all might be different too. It's super difficult. With Redis Enterprise, we have integrations with Datadog, Prometheus, and Grafana and New Relic, making it super easy to get a single unified view of your Redis Enterprise databases. Plus, in my opinion, I think the best Redis GUI out there, Redis Insight, our powerful desktop manager to visualize and optimize Redis data. But, I'm probably biased. Pay as you grow. So one of the biggest challenges with moving some workloads to the cloud is controlling the cost. It can really start to get out of hand with the layering of multiple services and continuous scale. So you can scale up and scale down depending on the throughput you need when you need it. Like I was saying with the elastic scaling. Over provisioning is a challenge in any architecture, but at least in public cloud environment, it can be easy as a few clicks to scale down those costs. Plus, we have Redis on Flash, which is what this GIF is, which is moving those larger data sets into SSD, keeping the data warm, but it's not nearly as expensive as having it in memory. So you can still have the same performance of, let's say, having the data in memory, but with 70% to 80% saving. So in regards to cost. And just really one quick note about Redis on Flash too is with Chat GTP becoming really popular and a bunch of these AI businesses popping out of the woodwork. These businesses, AI in particular, they use very large data sets, and Redis is a backbone of Chat GTP. And so usually Redis on Flash is being used, or very commonly, to house those larger data sets. So getting started to set up on-prem and getting started on-prem or on cloud is pretty simple. Like I said, we have the different cloud vendors that you can get started on. And we also can deploy a simple Docker container or do a seamless Kubernetes deployment. So it's super simple, and there are options for setting up Redis Enterprise through the marketplaces or one of the Kubernetes supported distributions like GKE, AKS, EKS, and many more. There's no other Redis that is better integrated with Kubernetes than Redis Enterprise. And I've done many, many talks and presentations on this. I'm a huge Kubernetes fan, and I realize those on the call, you're either a Kubernetes shop or you're not. It's kind of like the look at it. But I would say that for the customers that do do use Kubernetes and try to use Redis open source, it's extremely difficult to get those two technologies to work together. And Redis Enterprise has worked very hard to get the integration with Kubernetes correct and right. And so it's super efficient. Something that's really cool that we just released was being able to set up an active setup with Kubernetes. So with one single YAML file, 2 lines of code, you can automatically set up an active cluster distribution, which is insane because usually that would take, a day or two for a developer team to set up. So pretty sweet. And then let's see, anything else I didn't mention on here? I think we're good. And that's good. So yeah, that's it. So adopting a hybrid cloud architecture has never been easier than it is today. You can empower your product, service, or application with a distributed real-time architecture through Redis Enterprise. You can try Redis Enterprise Cloud for free to see how easy it is and to move workloads off your on-prem databases. And if you are thinking about Kubernetes, I highly recommend it. I know it's a huge jump for most organizations, even if you're small. You can download our Redis Enterprise operator for Kubernetes to give it a test drive. So that's it. Thanks.